Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Friday, February 24, 2023. It's about 3:35 in the afternoon here on the East Coast of the United States. George Allen Kelly, that's the Arizona rancher, the case that we've been covering. Remember, he's sitting in his farmhouse. It's in a desert. He's got 170 acres that are his. His property abuts the Arizona-Mexico border. When he hears a commotion outside and he hears gunshots, he goes out with his shotgun and sees a gang of people approaching his house in fatigues, and he fires over their heads, and they take off and they run towards the Mexican border and disappear over the border. Later on, he's gathering his horses to bring them into his barn, and he sees someone who appears to be dead. He calls the police. The police come. He's charged with first-degree murder. First-degree murder is planned, plotted murder. If you planned and plotted to kill somebody, you're not going to call the police yourself when you come upon the body, but this was the government's theory. He was arrested and held on $1 million bail. This is a retired rancher whose property is not worth anywhere near $1 million, and the court refused to lower the bail. After the government had an opportunity to examine the evidence in its possession, and after defense counsel had an opportunity to challenge that evidence, the court held a hearing. At the end of the hearing, the court didn't believe the government and reduced the bail to zero. All he had to do was pledge his property, meaning he can't secretly sell the property, but doesn't have to pledge money. He doesn't have to get a bond, an insurance policy, and he's free to go home. As someone who has set bail in thousands of cases, I can tell you what that means to the judicial mind. It means that the government's case is not as strong as the government claimed. Okay, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the government found two witnesses who will say not that Mr. Kelly fired his shotgun above the crowd to scare them away, which is perfectly lawful, but that, in fact, he was hunting them down and shot the dead guy in the back. Where did these two people come from? There are two of the illegal immigrants who crossed the border attempting to enter the U.S. illegally, who were trying to turn state's evidence to the government in return for being allowed to stay here illegally. This was an organized gang of people that entered Kelly's property, and when he legally fired above their head, he was absolutely within the law, under Arizona law, under the local law, and under federal law. Here's what his lawyer had to say about this. Testimony is something that is bought and sold by drug traffickers the same way that drugs and people are bought and sold. In this case, the benefit they're getting is security for their smuggling route through Mr. Kelly's property. And they're sending a message to anyone else defending his or her own property, that if you defend your property against us, you will be arrested, and there will be witnesses who will come to stand against you. Brianna Larkin, lawyer for George Kelly. So basically, she's saying the government bought this testimony. The government buys testimony all the time. It will give a benefit to the witness. In this case, you can stay here legally, even though you came here illegally, or we won't prosecute you as a human or drug trafficker, even though that's what you were doing. We won't prosecute you for trespassing, even though that's what you were doing, if you'll tell us what we want to hear against Mr. Kelly. Here is a recently retired, though he's still a young man, Border Patrol agent in that very part of Arizona, describing exactly what he believes was going on. Take a listen.
Everything that I'm seeing, my professional experience would tell me that that guy was either a scout or an actual guide for a group. With the radio, much more likely he was probably scouting out in advance, or the front man, if you will. But that type of activity and behavior doesn't take place out there unless it's part of the cartel.
The person he's talking about, that guy, of course, is the person who was killed, the body that George Kelly found on his property when he was searching for his horses and when he himself called the police. One would think that this would be a simple case of the trajectory of the bullet And did that bullet come from Mr. Kelly's rifle? Now, the government has the rifle, the government has the bullet. If the government had evidence that the bullet came from that rifle, wouldn't we know about it? Why doesn't the government tell that to the court? That tells me, even if I were neutral in this case, even if I were the judge in the case, it tells me that the government does not have the goods, that either this guy was shot in the back by somebody else or he wasn't shot in the back. He was killed by somebody else and not by Mr. Kelly. They've had Kelly's, I could be proven wrong, but they've had Kelly's rifle for a month. They've had the bullet that entered this guy for a month. If the bullet came from Kelly's rifle and if that bullet entered his back, wow, I would think that evidence would be front and center in a courtroom, and it isn't. Head scratcher. What is the government doing? Who is it protecting? More as we get it. Judge Napolitano, have a great weekend. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.